you. 'Cause you keep us out of sight. And it's true, keep us all your lies, all your lies. All the way to the midnight hour. All the way we go, we go. All the way, we're gonna fly out and run it wild until the midnight hour. The lights out, I feel you, you're inside of this room, you're close by, I can't move, paradise at the side of you. You walk up, your hands out, I stand up, my guard's down, you whisper in my ear, paradise at the side of you. 'Cause you keep us out of sight. And it's true, keep us all your lies, all your lies.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Woman buys portraits, then discovers alarming ways every person in them died. The 31-year-old quickly turned investigator and discovered the morbid history behind the alluring portraits, as every family member in the paintings had allegedly died in strange and terrifying ways. Explained Becky Ann, quote, "I did research into the house and found that the photos were obtained from a place of tragedy." I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. Deep in the Amazon jungle, one man.
Hi, I'm Stan Gordon. Check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio with Gary the Big Guy.
Yeah, let me finish. One man.
Hi, I'm Mark Muncy. Check out Night Dreams Talk Radio with Gary the Big Guy.
Yeah, do you mind? One man, naked and afraid.
I'm losing my mind.
You and me both, sister. One man, Gary the Big Guy. No boats, no lights, no motor cars, not a single luxury.
Hey, any more and you'll have to pay a royalty.
Okay, that's it.
Hit it.
From the summer vacation studios deep in the Amazon jungle, from that tree right there. See at the top, he's swinging.
I'm losing my mind.
Twice?
All right. Coming to you live, for now, on Night Dreams Talk Radio, naked and afraid, Gary the Big Guy Anderson.
Please put that
Boy,
away.
we are back, and I can tell you, it's always a challenge to get here sometimes. I have to go at least 30 feet to get into the studio. In the news, can you believe JC, a Japanese gentleman, 54 years old, had a cockroach in his apartment, and he went crazy. And he got cans of the bug killer, and he was spraying it all over his apartment. And wow, you know what happened? He had a blast. It totally disintegrated his whole apartment. When the heater kicked on, it blew up.
He just had one. And I'll tell you what, that seems a little overkill, but hey, maybe he solved his problem.
Well, the good news is the cockroach didn't die.
Oh, wow. But I bet he did.
Well, I bet when his landlord gets done with him, you wish that the cockroach and him both died.
Yeah, there goes a deposit.
Yeah, isn't a lot of things in the news strange?
Oh, yes. It gets stranger. Just when you think, Gary, you can't get any stranger, it always tops itself.
Well, a guy in Wyoming decided to adopt a baby. You ready for this? Coyote.
Yeah, I think I've seen a video of something like that.
Well, this one didn't go down friendly. Now,
Right.
there's one on Facebook where a guy has his coyote. He has it halfway trained. It still bites a little bit, but it's kind of affectionate. Its hat plays with the dogs. Well, this one killed the guy's dogs and literally mauled him.
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you, coyotes can really become a nuisance. I know in our area, people trap them because of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what they're going to do here to wolves in our state? They're going to slaughter a lot of them.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised that because they really are protective in a lot of places of the wolves.
And in the state of Washington, and only in the state of Washington, they got a bill up with our state to, when the legislators get together, they got this bill to ban gas-powered lawnmowers, leaf blowers, weed eaters. And if you, written into this is if you get caught, you go to jail.
I'll tell you. Now, you talk about extreme. We've got real criminals out there, but what are you in for? Well, I use a gas lawnmower.
Yeah, and they said because it puts out all these emissions. Okay, wow, that is the most ridiculous. Okay, you can't take your boat out because it has a outboard motor?
Right. I mean, when does it stop? When do these, where's the line? It's just ridiculous.
You need to write a letter and tell them, hey, I got an idea.
Oh, yeah.
I ran a lawnmower, which you did for how many seasons with cooking oil? Use cooking oil. Now, wouldn't that get rid of the pollution? I mean, it would be nice. I mean, your neighbors would think, oh, God, he's barbecuing again. Fish and chips.
Yeah, for 3 years. Yes, for 3 years, I used oil. Its lawn smelled like French fries. When it leaked, it didn't, ruin the grass and was spotty. It was a win-win for everybody. The cats loved it, everything.
Yeah, I got a science project for you. Get yourself a 12-volt car battery, JC. Get a glass of water. Take wires from the positive and negative of the batteries. Get some long nails and wrap the wire on each nail. And if you can figure out how to solder it, do it. Put it in the glass, and when it bubbles, you know what it creates, don't you?
What creates acid, doesn't it?
No, hydrogen.
Or hydrogen, yeah.
Yeah, you could power your car on that.
You could. You might also power yourself to the moon.
Oh, you never know. Maybe ETs will come in and say, hey, you can't have that. So
Yeah,
who's our guest tonight, and what are we going to be talking about?
Hey, our guest tonight is Paul Wallis. Now, he is an UFO researcher, speaker, author, and his work probes the mysteries of mankind's origins with ancient aliens and between them and were they mistaken for gods.
Well, Paul, welcome back to the show. And I got a question from you. Have you ever known anybody use cooking oil in their lawnmower?
G'day, Gary. I really enjoyed hearing that story. Yes, I have. It's been recommended to me in the past. I haven't tried it yet, but having heard your story, you've given me a prompt to give it another go.
Well, I mean, look at it. You could, if you like fish and chips, everybody will come around your house when you're sitting there cutting your grass.
Absolutely. And with the price of diesel doing what it's doing, that's not a bad idea.
Can you believe that this state is considering banning gas lawnmowers and weed eaters and all that stuff? Isn't that crazy?
I do think it's crazy because I think if we're concerned about pollution, it's the corporations we should be speaking to. It's big industry, not people mowing their lawns.
Yeah. What's next? Anyway, you got a new book that is coming out, or has it come out yet?
Well, we're talking mainly about the Eden Conspiracy today, which came out this year. That's the latest in the Eden series. There is another one in the pipeline for the beginning of 2024, which is connecting ancient narratives, the ancient texts of the Bible and mythologies around the world with everything that's been going on in the last few months in the stoush between the Pentagon and Congress over contact in the present. So there's more to come.
Now, I got to ask you a question. Let's go back in time. There was always these fire gods, the god of the mountain and god of this and god of that ancient people believed in. So if a race of, aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call them, our neighbors from out there, landed on Earth, wouldn't they be classified as a god?
Yes, I mean, there are so many stories from cultures around the world about advanced beings coming to planet Earth in the aftermath of a cataclysm. And they turn up with technology that's powerful enough to rehabilitate flooded land, clear the atmosphere of all the dust and ash and soot, so you can now see the sun and moon and stars, can reboot plant life and agriculture. I think if primitive human beings saw visitors doing that, of course they'd say, these are our superiors, these are our gods, these are the ones we should be worshipping. And I think some of our visitors really exploited that response.
Well, again, could our God even today be an ET?
Well, I think that many of the stories that we have read as God's stories in the past are, in fact, our ancestors' reports of paleo contact with extraterrestrials, which has been mistranslated through the generations because we've had centuries of translators with no sort of scientific framework or cosmological framework. They've thought they're translating spiritual texts, and so they found spiritual languages. But the great thing is, particularly with the biblical text, you can go back to the original Greek, the original Hebrew, and you can see what the texts say. And with a modern brain, you can read the text and say, hang on, that just described a wormhole. Hang on, that just described a portal technology. That just described remote communication. That just described artificial insemination, genetic modification. We have the language today to describe the kind of technology that our visitors came with, our ancestors wondered at, and then translators puzzled over for the intervening centuries.
I was talking to a person today, and they wanted me to ask you this question. Could actually Jesus been an ET?
Well, the story of Jesus is fascinating because the Gospels, the canonical Gospels, tell us there was something anomalous about his conception. And Christians like to tell that story as if it's unique, except his cousin had a very similar experience. Mary's cousin Elizabeth had an anomalous pregnancy and produced a very significant human being, John the Baptist, who Jesus said was the greatest human who had ever lived. Their stories are really a repeat of Abraham and Sarah's experience back in the Hebrew scriptures. And they don't stand alone in the Judeo-Christian tradition. You can go to the East, listen to the story of Lao Tzu, the Yellow Emperor, and their conceptions are told in a similar way, all hinting that there was some kind of interference in the normal and natural processes to produce people who were more intelligent, more conscious than the average, and who were able to make a very positive and important contribution to human history. I think Pythagoras and Leonardo da Vinci would fit in that story as well. So Jesus' story actually fits into this wider pattern that says from time to time there's a little bit of intervention to nudge us forward in one way or another.
Well, again, religion, and I don't want to get into it, but it kind of makes me wonder, everything that we have learned might not be even 100% true or true at all. Just a couple weeks ago, I was reading in a science journal, they figured men were walking this earth 27,000 to 24,000 or 25,000 years ago.
Yes, well, the question of human origins is really fascinating because in terms of human civilization, the general consensus has been we started rolling really about 10,000 years ago. Except there is now archaeology that gives evidence to megalithic societies prior to that date. Paleoanthropologists now concede that people of our shape and build have been on the planet for at least 200,000 years, altering the environment with fire, with some built technology. And so the human story is far longer than you and I were taught in school, and it gives plenty of time for contact with visitors.
Well, you think of the pyramids, you think of the Sphinx, you think about all these other places worldwide, some of the places, the plateau in Africa, all this stuff doesn't compute with our technology in that time frame, what they're saying that was built. And that makes me wonder, were we visited? Were we slaves at one point? Or were we brought here as slaves to harvest the riches of this planet? This is some type of answers I wish we could find out.
Well, if you go to the Mayan tradition and read the Popol Vuh, which is the expression of Mayan origin story from out of ancient Guatemala, they talk very openly, unapologetically about a time when non-human beings came and visited the planet, helped to terraform it after some kind of a planetary catastrophe. But then having done that, they sit down and they have this conversation. This is the feathered serpents that people may have heard of. People like Cucumatz, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, they're all different iterations of the same story. These feathered serpents sit down and say, now what we need is a working class. We need beings who can do the unpleasant work for us and bring us our food. And that is the reason they then set about engineering Homo sapiens. Now, if you think about that story, it doesn't flatter anybody. It doesn't flatter the feathered serpents to be so cynical. It doesn't flatter human beings that our origins are described that way. But they say it very frankly. And once you've read it so openly there, you realize there are sort of fast forward snapshot versions of that story in almost every story of human origins around the world, the Bible included. And so what you've just said, Gary, I think is quite right, that there was a time when we were the workforce for non-human others who colonized us. And if you go to Southern Africa, there are physical evidences to support that idea, because you've got the remains of ancient gold mines that far predate what we believe to be human capability. Our ancestors were here, not clever enough to build a farm or create a city, but clever enough to mine for somebody else. And that's the picture that emerges from out of Southern Africa.
It does, and that is where I'm scratching my head. So now we're coming up into modern days, and you look what is going on right now. We had disclosure, twice now with the Congress. And, I've had a lot of my friends, say, oh, God, we're going to finally get the truth. And I said, it's not going to happen. And actually, a couple of them quit talking to me till afterwards. And then they said, you were right. I feel it was a major whitewash. It was to appease a lot of people. And now they did it, and now it's not going anywhere anymore. It went up to Senate, and the Senate just said,
Yep. I to be honest, I don't know who it would appease, but certainly when the whole thing blew up with the David Grush complaint, and then we had the hearing on July 26th, a lot of people who communicate with me through Fifth Kind TV said, Paul, what do you think's going on here? Because you can bet your bottom dollar this is not going to lead to disclosure. And I had to agree, there has to be an end game. If Thomas Monheim, the Inspector General of the intelligence community, has allowed this complaint to escalate to the point where there's a congressional hearing, there must be some end game in mind. And I don't think it's sudden and total disclosure. And I wondered if it was to do with simply passing the baton so that there's a different oversight of the program to before. And of course, that's exactly what has happened. Sean Kirkpatrick had to go. We now have the Pentagon's deputy directly oversighting the reverse engineering program, or supposedly so. So that's what has happened. There's been a change of oversight and not much more, other than I do think it was refreshing, and it might prove important, that the question of what technology we have from ET contact is in the hands of the Pentagon, or I should say, the corporations to whom the Pentagon subcontracts these things. It is unusual that we've got the scientists working on the reverse engineering allowed to brief the press. So we're talking about Jacques Vallée, Gary Nolan, and Eric Davis. 10 years ago, if they wanted to sit down and do an interview with a journalist about the materials they were reverse engineering, they would end up in a ditch somewhere. So something has shifted, and shifted in a positive direction. But like you, Gary, no, I'm not sitting on the edge of my seat waiting for the president to step up to the plate and say, my fellow Americans, I got something I want to tell you. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, especially when they're trying now to impeach our president. We have another former president. What's going on with him? I mean, the whole political thing is upside down in Washington, D.C. I'm hoping this country don't go into a civil war here in the next few months. That's what I'm worried about. And we got all this going, and now everything else is on the back burner. But, even reverse engineering, again, my dad was an electronic engineer. He used to design components for aircraft, for Boeing. And, I asked him one time, years and years ago when he was alive, I said, hey, could they back engineer? And he looked at me, he goes, no. And I've talked to some other scientists for the years and about the same subject. If you had your cell phone and you went back to 1960 and you gave it to the most intelligent scientist in the world who dealt with electronics, he could probably figure out what it does. But they couldn't bring it back. They couldn't back engineer it. And this is the part that it concerns me is you hear, oh yes, we back engineered this craft or some people claim this. I just don't think we have the ability to go through something that's so far advanced. We can maybe figure out how it works, but to go back and to recreate it, I just don't think we have that capability yet.
Oh, Gary, that's a superb question. What we're hearing from the physicists who are allowed to speak to the press is that the materials we have, they're beginning to understand what they do. They're not saying they've been able to reverse engineer it yet. This is just what they're saying publicly. They are working out that the fabric, the materials used for some of these craft has some kind of an anomalous effect on space-time. So that's very interesting. That's what they're saying publicly. Privately, have they gone further? I tend to agree with you, Gary. Reverse engineering is not a simple thing. And if we were simply given retrieved materials and told, make one of those, we might struggle. But of course, the claims have gone a little bit further than that in 2023. What Hayam Ashed told us in 2020, and just to remind people, he was the brigadier general who for 28 years was Israel's chief of space security. So it was his job to know if we're in contact. It was his job to know if we're under threat. And in 2020, he said, America and Israel are in contact and have been for more than 7 decades, and there is a degree of collaboration going on. And what we've heard in some of the testimony following the Grush complaint echoes that, collaboration. So it's not just a matter of, dumping, a cell phone into a chimpanzee pen and seeing if the chimps can build their own. If there's collaboration, then that changes the scenario altogether. And we have to go back to the question, what technology has been made available to us?
You mentioned chimps. I think if they took a busload of them and replaced the Congress and the Senate, the White House with those, we would be far more advanced in our technology right now.
Well, I think 2 things I would say about the political scene at the moment, and not just in the USA, but there's been a great, over the last 6 or 7 years, injection of energy into polarizing people, if I can put it that way. People are very divided, very polarized, hostile to one another, unable to discuss ideas, and it reflects in political life. And I think I'm concerned by that. because I think while we, the general public, are in that state, can we really expect intelligent governance? We're more likely to be manipulated. If we're feeling fearful, confused, anxious, we're very easy to manipulate. And in fact, you go back to some of the very early Christian literature, what's called Gnostic literature, and that really just means the books that didn't quite make it into the New Testament. Some of those writers were very clear that we have cosmic company that loves seeing humanity in that state because they parasite off our lower emotions. If we are anxious, if we're hostile, if we're aggressive, there are these archonic entities, they're called, who love that and who feed off that. That's even a story you can find in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures. Go to 1 Kings 22, and we get a glimpse of the Sky Council. So again, that represents a number of demographics with a hands-on project Earth. And what are they doing in that council? They're fomenting war. And being steps forward, an archonic entity who says, I reckon I can trick this nation to go to war against this nation on the basis of false intelligence. And the writer tells us that story, I think, so that we can be forewarned that things like that can happen in the present day. And we should be very careful of being pushed into angry, aggressive mindsets, because that's when the ones who really pull the strings, and that's not the presidents, can start playing games with us.
That's the scary part, too. And, I think back, supposedly, in the early 50s, where these UFOs flew over the White House. And they said, oh, those were Nazi UFOs. I just don't buy that the, Hitler scientists were that far advanced to have UFOs. Otherwise, they would have won the war no matter what. But
well, indeed. And if they had been, and you could say the same about the Tic Tacs of 2004, if for one moment we had thought that was China, our response to those craft and to China would have been completely different. And the same in the 50s, our response to Germany would have been totally different in that moment. That story just doesn't hold together.
And, even the media is a blame for a lot of this misinformation. The balloons were flying over our country the beginning of summer. They didn't report them as balloons at the start. It was UFOs, and we were shooting them down. I mean, again, everybody's trying to get on the bandwagon, which then muddies the water, which gets a lot of people go, It really takes off the subject.
It does, and I do think even the term UAPs kind of confuses things a little. What are we talking about? Are we talking about alien craft? And thankfully, post the hearing, we've got beyond that, and we now know we are talking about non-human craft, or what Eric Davis referred to as off-world vehicles not made on this earth, or what David Grush refers to as non-human technologies. So I think we've got more clarity than we had before. We are talking about technology that is not human, and that we not only have access to those materials, but to the non-human biologics who piloted them. And I would like to hear far more questions put about that. I mean, Nancy Mace in that hearing did ask, sorry, you're talking about pilots? And we were just about to get on to, are they alive? Are we talking to them? Before David Grush was having to say, we'll have to talk about that in a skiff.
Yeah. We need to take a break. Paul, we'll be back in about 4.5 minutes. And then I want to ask you a couple questions, a couple things I talked to you before we went on the air. One of the gentlemen who testified in Congress said, and we'll talk about that, about people being put in cages and being loaded on a UFO. So we're going to talk about that. That was testified to Congress. So something is going on. We'll be right back, so stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not inside. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers Talk Show will fix face your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
The strange news. I'm Guy Ticker. Venomous spider crawls into unsuspecting woman's ear while she's sleeping. Susie Torres from Kansas City, Missouri, endured an arachnophobe's worst nightmare when a venomous spider crawled inside her ear whilst she was fast asleep. When Ms. Torres took herself to the doctors after hearing a swishing sound that wouldn't budge, it was revealed that a brown recluse spider was in fact living inside her ear. The venomous spider is so called due to their tendency to tuck themselves into small spaces. According to Live Science, Ms. Torres told KSHB-TV in Kansas City she was informed what had actually happened when a nurse peered inside her ear. In other spider news, a giant hungry huntsman spider devoured an entire possum. An Aussie proved that after capturing on camera a huge huntsman spider readying an unlucky pygmy possum for its dinner. Sometimes known as giant crab spiders, this 8-legged venomous creepy crawly was spotted with its prey dangling above a door in Tasmania, an island state in the southeast of Australia. Young boy eaten alive and dad seriously injured by crocodile while rowing on a river. A 1-year-old boy was eaten alive and his dad seriously injured by a crocodile while they were rowing on a river. The youngster was snatched from the canoe by the beast while the pair were fishing off the coast of Lahad Datu in Sabah, Malaysia, yesterday morning. Bigfoot corpses aren't found, as Sasquatch beasts are cannibals who eat their own dead. A dead Bigfoot has never been found, as the species eats its own dead. So says a community of Bigfoot enthusiasts debating why the elusive beasts have never been discovered. The debate started on Reddit's dedicated Bigfoot page and offered up a variety of reasons why a Sasquatch corpse has never been found, if it does indeed exist. One user wrote, quote, "They are super rare, so the odds are hella low of stumbling across one before it decomposes, and the bones get gnawed up, eaten by various critters, and eventually dissolve." Close quote. UFO bubble goes pop. Watch those skies. No, watch our intelligence agencies and their penchant for disinformation. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a UFO. Keep looking up in those skies. Largest potentially hazardous asteroid detected in 8 years. Twilight observations with the Dark Energy Camera at the Cerro Tololo International American Observatory in Chile, a program of the U.S. National Science Foundation supported by Noory Lab, have enabled astronomers to spot 3 near-Earth asteroids, or NEAs, hiding in the glare of the sun. One is the largest object potentially hazardous to the Earth to be discovered in the last 8 years. The NEAs are part of an elusive population that lurks inside the orbits of Earth and Venus. This is a notoriously challenging region for observations because asteroid hunters must contend with the glare of the sun. By taking advantage of the brief yet favorable observing conditions during twilight, however, the astronomers found this elusive trio of NEAs. One is a 1.5-kilometer-wide asteroid called 2022 AP7, which has an orbit that may someday place it in Earth's path. Watch out. The other asteroids called 2021 LJ4 and 2021 PH27 have orbits that safely remain interior to Earth's orbit. 2021 PH27, by the way, is the closest known asteroid to the Sun. As such, during its orbit, its surface gets hot enough to melt lead. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. The biggest names, the brightest stars on the red carpet and on the air with Gary Anderson. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, when it comes to the big get, Gary's got him. Like voiceover artist Jim Meskimen. Is his mom really Mrs. C on Happy Days? Allison Arngrim from Little House on the Prairie. Oh, speaking of Little House, Gary's got Dean Butler from the show talking about his book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Here's
There's much more.
Yeah, there is. Check this out. Loretta Swit, Hot Lips Houlihan from MASH. So listen to Gary Anderson, because you never know who's gonna show. That's why we do these promos, right? Gary Anderson, where the stars come out to play. Tune in early, tune in often, right here on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Night Dreams brings on the night worldwide. Did you know you can find us on your favorite app? And now you can watch us live on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And now, here's Gary.
And here I am with Paul Wallis. You know, I was interviewed in the last month, a person who testified, a former Marine, to Congress about what he saw in Asia. After they had their earthquake and I can't even talk. Anyway, they were there to, offer protection because we were dropping, supplies to the people and all that stuff. And he was out in the jungle with 5 other Marines, and that's what they were doing. They were protecting the drops. And they went up this hill, and Indonesia, by the way. And they went up the hill, and they were looking down, and they saw this craft. It was about 300 feet in diameter, going clockwise. And then he said he saw these trucks pull up one by one with crates of humans on it. And they just didn't take the crates on board of this craft, and the craft was hovering above the ground. The whole truck just kind of levitated into the craft, one after another. And that really alarmed them. They tried to radio, they couldn't radio, and all of a sudden they were surrounded, he said, by the guys like in black uniforms with carrying guns and all this stuff, and they thought they were going to be killed. And he said it was one of the most terrifying things. But what was bad is all the people screaming in these crates being uplifted into this craft. What are they doing with humans?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I was very intrigued. I mentioned Hayam Shed's statement in 2020 when he says that we're involved in collaborations and that we are supporting our visitors' research around planet Earth. I would like to know what that research is, because my immediate question was, does this relate to the abduction phenomenon? And report of abductions is not just a contemporary experience. It is one of the most prevalent aspects of the paleo-contact narrative all around the world. Cultures on every continent have an indigenous report of abduction experiences. It's there in the Bible as well. And in fact, you've got very large craft referenced in the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament that talk about taking large numbers of human beings off planet to do something with them. And when you go to the ancestral stories and ask why on earth would ET visitors want to be hybridizing with human beings, there are a number of possibilities. Basically, they want to strengthen their own gene pool with our DNA, and that might be because their gene pool is diminished, or they might want some of what they see in Homo sapiens. But the other slightly more worrying possibility is that they want their descendants to be better adapted to planet Earth than they are. And I am beginning to lean towards that conclusion, that that is something that's going on here. And it's something that has been written about for hundreds and thousands of years. So while I don't have information about the specific encounter you've described, it might fit into that general picture.
It's scary because to think about these, hundreds and hundreds of people are vanishing. In this case, there was a lot of people being created and put on this craft. Regardless what they're doing, they're being kidnapped, they're being whatever. They're not going to be back with their loved ones. They're gone. And that tells me that, I've had so many people, Paul, come on the show. Oh, they're compassionate. They would never hurt mankind. They would never do cattle mutilation. They would never do human mutilation. They would never let a nuclear device go off on this planet. They're here to help mankind. But yet you hear stories like this, and that doesn't jive.
No, I think some would never do those things. I think we have had contact with cosmic visitors who would never do those things, and whose contact with us has been to nurture us and support us as a species. But I'm sorry to say that ancestral narrative is full of other stories that say we've had many visits from demographics who are here for what the planet has to offer, couldn't care less about human beings. Others who actually want to exploit the human race for genetic material. Others who've exploited us as a workforce. So it really is a kaleidoscopic picture. And I agree with you, Gary. I don't think we can be naive that an advanced presence means that they're advanced morally or have our best interests at heart. I think we need to listen to the full range of ancestral narrative about this to equip us for the full range of contact that we might be experiencing in the present.
That's the scary part. That's the part I really want to know. I really feel the government needs to come clean and tell the population. I mean, again, all these wars and all the killings going on worldwide constantly, but yet maybe we have another threat out there. Could one day decide, well, we want your planet. We don't need you guys.
Well, true. And those two things, as I said earlier, might not be unrelated. I mean, we might have some company that is delighted when humans go to war against each other and create all the misery and terror that they do. So that might also be part of the picture.
Well, what is your whole gut feeling on everything that's going on right now with this? Do you feel we're actually going to be told in the near future the real truth and get a real disclosure? Or do you feel we're going to just be manipulated like we are now?
I am pleased that there is far more disclosure happening now than 10 years ago. I mean, just before we came back on air, I heard that clip of Ronald Reagan talking at the time of his SDI, his Star Wars initiative. And in that period, people who went public with their knowledge of ET contact at covert government levels were suicided. I mean, I lived in England in a place called Amersham. We had a top secret research facility directly involved with Ronald Reagan's SDI, and 25 of those top technical scientists were suicided. And it was so obvious that these weren't suicides.
I got to jump in, Paul. When you say suicided, why don't you come out and say what you feel?
Well, they were reported as suicides. And I think it was Clive Jenkin, the union leader, who went to the press and said it is statistically impossible that these were all suicides. The families don't believe they were, and neither do the coroners. The coroners are recording open verdicts. So how is it the minister tells us they're suicides? We need a public inquiry. And Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the day, said, oh, no, we don't need one of those. The minister's already given you the answer. So when something is so obviously engineered like that, when you have 25 deaths that were not suicides being presented that way, it is a threat to everybody else who might think of going to the press to say what they know. That's a generation ago. And we're in a totally different place now. Now we can listen to Jacques Vallée, James Lukatsky, Gary Nolan. We can listen to witnesses like Ryan Graves, David Fravor talking about experiences. Chris Mellon is allowed to leak the footage of the Nimitz engagement with the Tic Tac craft in 2004. So if people are paying attention, there is far more disclosure going on now than there has been in a long, long time for the last 70 years. And I welcome that. But I think it's almost an insurance against real disclosure. I think the drip of information is out there so that if the moment comes when it's blindingly obvious that we're in contact, there isn't that sudden jarring shock moment of people realizing what's going on. I mean, recent polling in the States says that about 2/3 of the American public, if they were to be told we're in contact, their answer, their response would be, "I'd already worked that out."
Well,
and I think that's really what the authorities want.
Now, I will say something. You mentioned Ronald Reagan, from that little clip of, the intro. I talked to Ronald Reagan a week and a half before that. And the reason why, because my dad was friends of a famous actor who was real good friends with Ronald Reagan. And I got to talk to Ronald Reagan, and I was really worried because we were so close to, in a Cold War, they was talking about, maybe, a nuclear war again and all that stuff that, back in the 70s and all that stuff. And anyway, I asked him, I said, Star Wars, is that going to protect us, against the Soviet Union, and he said, well, it'll protect us against them out there. And then he corrected himself. Yeah. And then he totally realized he opened his mouth, which he had a tendency to do. And then, then a week and a half later, he's up in front of the UN. He says his little famous speech. And that was on his mind. So maybe Star Wars was two things, maybe to protect us against another country and maybe protect us against them out there.
Yes, that's right. And it was a very carefully scripted statement that he made at the UN. He talked about an alien threat. Mm-hmm. And then there was this pause before he said, and what could be more alien than the threat of war? But that pause was very deliberate, and it echoed exactly what he'd told you privately, Gary, that this was about trying to create some kind of a protection between planet Earth and forces coming from elsewhere. And people picked that up. I mean, I lived in the UK, and we'd picked that up from Ronald Reagan's statements. There was this ambiguity. Is this about protection from Russia, or are we really talking about alien threats? And that was the language he used.
And it was kind of scary if you caught it, especially, like I said, talking to him a week and a half before that. And here's the thing, though. You got all these people are coming out and saying, oh, we're back engineering, or we have this, or we have that. One thing the governments are good at is disinformation. So they can come out and tell maybe the truth, but at the same time, by doing that, kind of makes people think, well, is it the truth? So at the same time, they're giving out information, but they're also making it where people think maybe it's disinformation.
Yes, there's always that question. Of course, it will always be partial information, but of course, the government doesn't have all the information. And we have to wonder how much information is moving from military intelligence to government. And then the question that follows from that, how much information is flowing from the private corporations who are actually doing the engineering work for the program and military intelligence? Because all this work has been subcontracted out to the aerospace industry. And what we really need to do is sit down with the executives of Northrop Grumman and Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Skunk Works. That's where the work is actually happening. But have a think about this, Gary. They receive huge black budgets for that work. And as long as they are still working on it, that finance will continue to flow to those corporations. Unaccountable black budgets. Corporations exist for profit. And so you've sort of built into the system an incentive not to disclose. Because if your scientists make a breakthrough in 12 months and you could actually get 5 years worth of funding, wouldn't you slow down the release of what you'd find? Well, we've found something, but we need to test it a bit more, you'd probably say, for the next 5 or 10 years. And that worries me, that because we've privatized the program, we've built in an incentive for secrecy and for not technology sharing. And I think as much as it would be very exciting to achieve interstellar travel, because I think that immediately puts us in a different relationship with our visitors. What about 0-point energy? How would our economies change if we had that? Would 8,000 people a year be freezing to death in the United Kingdom because they can't afford fuel if suddenly we had access to free energy? And I think that that's, for me, almost as important as the interstellar technology.
That's not going to happen. We have gone into wars over, oil.
Yes, of course.
And lost thousands of lives from it.
Yes.
And World War II and a lot of different wars we've been involved in is not so much what people think it is. It was other motives behind it. And that's what scares me. And JC, jump in for a minute. Didn't our guest who testified in Congress say that there is a secret government or under whatever it was, black government?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a secret government. Plus these, like Paul was saying, these private companies, they don't have to report these things. And so they've got stuff going on that we don't know. And it's mind-boggling what they're doing. And yeah, there's definitely a secret government going on.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. In the 1600s, a Presbyterian minister wrote exactly about this, JC. He wrote a book called The Secret Commonwealth. And I should say this was a Presbyterian minister in Aberfoyle, Scotland in the 1600s. That's a very conservative kind of Christian minister I've just described. But on the basis of his research, which was listening to the grassroots experience of people living in that part of Scotland, he concluded that we have visible governments and then we have elites who sort of call the shots. So you've got visible government, covert government, the elites calling the shots. And then he said there is an ET, non-human layer to that picture, where the elites are getting their agenda from non-human contact. He was incredibly brave to put that forward in the 1600s, if you can imagine that. And I think the picture he's painted is still accurate today. We have our visible leaders, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out they're not running the show. And then the elites, well, we can name some of those families, perhaps, the big corporate families, the big banking families. But I think no understanding of the world is complete until you realize there's a non-human layer to the decisions that govern planet Earth.
And that's what's really scary. I mean, you think you have all these rights, you don't have them. And again, all these people that are going missing, why aren't people making Congress?
Making more of that. This was a big part of Robert Kirk's work in the 1600s, pointing out the numbers of people who go missing and the apparent lack of interest by our government authorities. That was one of the things that first clued him that something real was going on and that the Ancient of Judson stories had something to them. And that concerns me. The statistics for missing people around the world are absolutely shocking. And yet it's not part of our news from day to day. It's an unspoken story. And again, when I heard Herr Mashed talk about research collaborations, I had to wonder, do those two things relate?
I don't know. I just know that people are being taken. I don't know by who, by what, but people are vanishing all over this planet. And, you get into, some of the other, like Africa and other continents in this planet, who knows how many people are vanishing from there? Because they have no way to keep track.
No, it is an international phenomenon. And that is why cultures all around the world have ancient narratives that allow people to talk about this and ask who's doing it, why, what's happening. When you mention Africa, very interesting there. If you go to Kenya or Ghana in particular, you will hear accounts of abduction where people go missing for a period and then they're returned, which is very mystifying. That's not like any human pattern of human trafficking. And when the people come back, they will talk about the hybridization program, although not very publicly because they know they're likely to be hospitalized or medicated if they share that story. But that is part of the picture too, not just people going missing forever, but people going missing for a period and then not being able to talk about what happened while they were away.
What makes it bad is you have some people, that either need medication or are on medication, and that they believe that they've been abducted and all this stuff, right? And they tell their stories, which really clouds up the issue of the real people that are being abducted and maybe not even returned. And who knows what's happening to them. It really just kind of... That
is exactly why back in the 90s, the Pentagon hired John Mack because they wanted psych evaluations on military personnel who were reporting abduction experiences. I mean, they wanted to know, are these people safe to deploy? Is it safe to put these guys, in a plane, or should they be flying a desk? They wanted psych evals on these people. John Mack studied more than 50 case studies and came back with a report saying no pathology is indicated. These people are not mentally ill. They're not having hallucinations. They are experiencing something real that merits serious study. And so he was able to see the wood for the trees, and he was the top psychologist at Harvard. He was the chief of their clinical psychology department. So he was the best placed person in the world to be able to filter delusion from reality. And so that kind of work has been done. I mean, I've worked myself in mental health units, and I'm familiar with people who have psychotic episodes, who suffer from delusions. And as a pastor, you have to spend a lot of time trying to filter fact from fiction if you're trying to help people. But once you've done that, you find the abduction phenomenon is real, it's ancient, and in terms of planet Earth, it's global.
And that's scary. Now, our time has gone by so fast. We need to get you back on in a few months. You want to tell people how they can find your website, how they can find you on YouTube, and your books?
Absolutely. Well, for the Eden Conspiracy and all my Eden books, you can go to Amazon and Kindle. For Escaping from Eden and the Scars of Eden, you can go wherever books are sold. For Echoes of Eden, the Eden Conspiracy, go to Amazon. You can find me at paulanthonywallis.com, and you can contact me through that. You can find me in the comments of the Paul Wallis channel on YouTube, and also at fifthkind.tv, and the Fifth Kind TV on YouTube as well. I love engaging with people in the comments, so I'll look forward to seeing people there.
Well, Paul, you have a very good Christmas, will you?
I will do that, and you too, Gary, and you too, JC.
Okay, you take care, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. And bye. Well, JC, who's our guest tomorrow? What are we going to be talking about?
Listen, Gary, our guest tomorrow is Alice Ingram. She is from Little House on the Prairie, the actress who played Nellie, the brat. She's going to be on. Looking forward to it. I know you are. And we're going to be, reminiscing about what it was like. Everything goes with that.
We're going to find all about Little House on the Prairie, what it was like, how they constructed that set where they did, and all the things where she got, put in a wheelchair and all the way down into the pond, all this stuff. And she was really a brat. She was always causing problems, that, to Melissa Gilbert. I mean, on the show, she was but you know what? She fit it perfectly, that.
She did, and I think we're about the same age. Because I remember she looked about the same age back then, and there was always somebody you could relate to in your school that reminded you of her.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's another thing. It's going to be a great show tomorrow, so make sure you tune in. And then on Friday, who do we have?
Oh, boy. Listen, Gary, we have Fred Roll coming on. He and his relatives were attacked by Bigfoot. They're lucky they got out alive. It's a very hair-raising, scary story. Plus, he takes reports from other people around Alaska about these scary, hairy men. They are not your friends.
Do you mean they're not like my next-door neighbor?
No, they may be hairy like your neighbor, but not the same attitude.
When I was talking to the medicine woman of Muckleshoot Tribe it was about 8-10 years ago, she told stories about Bigfoot would come in, and the women would be down at the river, washing their clothes. They'd have their babies there, and a bunch of Bigfoot would come in there and grab the squaws or grab the babies and run off, and they would find the bones.
Yeah, and there's similar reports. I've heard him report, because he's a part of an Indian tribe. They had kind of the same oral tradition. Now, that's kind of scary. Think of 1,000 miles apart, the same kind of traditions.
All around. It's not here. It's all over the world with Bigfoot. Yeah. Some people think they're here. They give off orbs. They can telecommunicate. They would never hurt people. Well, maybe people have had those type of encounters. But what really intrigues me is, with all these encounters of Bigfoot for all the years, why doesn't somebody have a focused picture of it? Why is every single picture blurry?
That's $1 million question. $1 million picture, too, if you had a good one.
Maybe it's the ionic sphere negative charge that these creatures, can present out to cameras, which causes all the images to be blurry.
It's the fuzziness.
It could
Gary.
be. So it's going to be a great show. And don't forget, we have call-ins on Friday, 2 hours. You can call in. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You need new appliances in your house, what you're going to give your loved one for Christmas, what recipes you have, whatever. The 2 hours of the show after our guests is, for us, there's a lot of people out there that don't have somebody to talk to. And that's what we are here for. You can just talk and we can chat about anything. Well, till tomorrow, when we talk about Little House on the Prairie, everybody have a great one. Check out Paul Wallis's channel, his books. I tell you what, the first time I had him on, I really connected with the guy because, he's very open. And not a lot of people are that way when it comes to UFOs. Everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side.
Friends with all the night dreamers, talking to you at night. Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's